Back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. This Morning Line is sponsored by
There we go. Takis McGinnis Elder Care Law.
And Miss McGinnis is not with us today.
No, she's not.
This is like you and me old days. Okay?
Yes, it is.
Just a couple of guys. Couple of guys. All right, the phone line's open, 737-7587. I'm just curious.
But as you know, Barbara's terrific.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, she's been on the show many times.
She has, but doesn't go back as long as you and I.
Not as long as, yeah.
All right,
that's right.
I can sometimes finish your sentences.
That's true.
But I do love Barbara. Listen, if you would, for the viewers, give them a sense, if some maybe want to call, what are some of the main issues or the most common issues you deal with clients who come through the door? I know you may have already touched on some of those. Well,
one is, like, I think about, it's always kind of goes back, so, well, let's talk about what happened yesterday.
All right.
Like in the practice, is, someone comes in and she's widowed. We had, at one point, we had talked to her about her husband, who was in a long-term care facility in Hendersonville. So she came back in, he died last year. She comes back in yesterday, late 80s, with 2 children. She comes in and she's worried about, well, what happens if I get sick?
Okay.
What's going to happen now? I've got 2 houses, where one of them my daughter lives in, and I've got a little bit of money, and how do I make sure that I can leave something to my children? And what happens if I go into a nursing home? It's like, well, you're in good health now, but you're 88 years old, and and she's thinking, well, and her husband is a veteran, so it's like thinking about, it's like trying to plan for somebody for the long haul. Sure,
and what you described there, it's got to be standard. Everyone at some point comes to that.
Exactly, and I always say to her, I don't always say, but sometimes I say to my families, I'll say is, when you get into the, when you start early, you start planning early. One of the things that we look for is that, all right, how old are you? What illnesses do you have? Do you have a chronic illness of some sort? How is that going to affect your ability to function as you age? Okay. Is it physical function? Is it cognitive function? What sometimes referred to as executive function. Can you read? Can you reason? Can you Can you manage your own money? Can you set up your pillbox? All those sorts of things, and you start thinking about that, and then we look at, like, for the woman that came in yesterday afternoon, it's like, all right, you're in good health now, so what do we need to do to make sure that you're taken care of in the future? Yeah. I mean, that's really what it is, and how do we make the money last? Did you ever
run into maybe a woman who is in this situation, and she needs a certain amount of money to last, but she's so dead set on leaving something for her kids that she's hesitant to spend it?
Yes, all the time.
See, I was going to say, how important is it? See, I have absolutely zero expectation that my folks will leave anything for me. I don't care. I don't want them to. I mean, there may be keepstakes and stuff, but I don't need to inherit anything from my folks. I want them to spend every cent they got on themselves up to the very end. And you know what? My son better get ready for that, too, because that's kind of my attitude. So I'm not sure I get that.
Sure, and that's the way you feel.
I know. I understand other people feel differently.
But other people might be your parents.
Well, yeah.
And sometimes, see, I
don't know how my parents feel.
And that's sort of an intergenerational thing, and I know it's been studied. Where many years ago there was a study by a major financial institution, and they looked at the intergenerational thoughts about. That the 80 sums at that time, they were, their primary concern was to make sure that they could leave a legacy. The 60-year-olds or their children were going, their primary concern was making sure mom is taken care of, and the inheritance is secondary. And so now it doesn't.
That's
always,
really my attitude.
Yeah, and exactly, and so a lot of that then becomes. All right, children having conversation with their parents, which is, all right, is acknowledging, if you're the child, it's acknowledging that it's an important goal for your parents. Okay. And when we're planning for our older clients, it's almost always an important goal for our clients. The clients are always the elder. Okay. And so when we talk about estate planning, and we talk about long-term care planning, and we talk about life care planning, is what we call it in our practice, legal, financial, and personal care needs, and how we integrate that. One of the legal needs of our clients, our older clients, is to leave a legacy. All right, now, what kind of legacy is that going to be for our older clients, for that cohort? It is about leaving some money or property or something. and that's important to them.
Okay.
Now, it may be less important to the children, or maybe like low down on the list, but it's important to the elder. So how do we make sure that we make that happen? All right, now, we always tell them, though, when we start ranking our goals, okay, this is the goals in the order of priority. Okay, first is your good health, safety, well-being, and quality of life. That's goal number 1 in our practice.
Sure.
All right, now, if the elder or the elder's family, if that's not really what they're looking for, they're not going to be a good fit for us.
Okay.
They're just not going to be, so.
Meaning, if you get the sense that that's not their first priority, you'll probably say, well,
yeah, I don't know that this is, maybe, you passed a lot of lawyers to get to see us. There's probably someone down the street that can do a will and power of attorney for you, but really, we very seldom see that, because fortunately, I think we have people kind of know what we're about, what we're about, and frankly, what we're finding is that our children and also our elders, I think that they buy into our approach.
Okay. Yeah, that's the approach that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the humane.
And so what a lot of that then becomes clarification of goals. It's like, look, we understand that you want to make sure that you leave something to your children, but here what your children are saying is that they would welcome that, but their primary concern for you is that they're willing to wait for it. And part of us is having conversations about it, and then we say, I remember, we represent one gentleman who's early 70s, and he's worried about, he wants a plan and whatever else, and we're saying something like, well, I told him, I said, okay, we can put money aside for you, we can set it in a trust, you can live on this other money, and you'll be able to live for the next 19 years, and do very well, by that, at which time he'll be 90, and you may run out of your money then, but you'll still have your house in a trust.
Yeah.
He goes, that's good.
Yeah, that's a little peace of mind is what that is, yeah.
Yeah, he goes, that's good, and he's going, okay. Because he was worried about, how do I have a plan? He had a chronic illness that he's had for decades, but it's now suddenly, it's one of those latent, young person's illnesses that suddenly started to manifest itself, and leaves him ambulatory in a wheelchair. And he's going, 3 years ago I was hiking the the Grand Teton Mountains or whatever, and now I'm sitting in this wheelchair.
Yeah.
And so I need a plan. And it's like, okay, here's your, so we came up with a plan, like I said, he realized that he would turn age 90 and he could have a great quality of life. We increased what he needed to spend by almost $2,000 a month, and he would still have money left at age 90. And by that time, he may or may not be able to live in the house, but it's like, okay, you sell the house, he's got money from the trust, and he's good to go for the rest of his life.
Yeah. So until he came in to talk to you, he wasn't really sure how he was set up.
How he was going to be set up.
He had the resources, he just didn't know.
He didn't know how.
He wasn't sure.
Yeah, and a lot of it is how do we use resources wisely?
Now, you're not a financial planner.
I am not.
But it does sound like you touch on part of that when you look at what their assets are and what they can do.
Right, and it's always good, and we find that our representations always go really very well if the client brings in a financial advisor or their financial advisors, because many of them, they've been with them for years. They know much more about our client, because we see them.
Oh, sure.
And that makes a great team, because it's the legal and the personal in our office, and then the financial advisor can step in, and kind of give guidance of, okay, where's the money? Okay, is this a low tax basis asset? Should we draw from that first? What are the tax consequences of drawing out money and paying for care? Those are things that the financial advisors, can be very helpful with.
Right.
And it makes for a good representation.
Your office, by the way, you have a lot of different staffers on it. Yes. You have a nurse, right?
Yeah. Well, Barbara's a nurse, as you know. She's a geriatric nurse practitioner.
She's also a lawyer.
She's a lawyer,
yeah.
But we have. We have two elder care coordinators. One is a licensed master social worker.
Okay.
She's been with us. Deborah's been with us for almost 12 years. She used to work at. She did discharge planning at a local hospital. Okay. So she always would say is, I would see people like when they came into the to the emergency room, and then they got discharged. Now I can see people sometimes for years.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's very rewarding for her.
So she likes that,
to see, how you can help people so they stay out of the emergency room.
All right.
You know, the other elder care coordinator we have, Patty's, but she was a, she came to us from the district long-term care ombudsman office. Okay. So she was the one that went around and talked to care facilities,
deal with
advocate
complaints,
for
problems, and things like that.
Advocate for elders. Yeah.
All right. So the nurses, and then, but you don't have a financial plan.
We do not have a financial.
You can refer them sometimes.
Oh, we do.
I imagine you know some of those, right?
Right.
Okay. But
you know, so but most people, they come to us, they already have somebody that they've got money, and so somebody is. You know, maybe it's a local bank or somebody that they have a good relationship with. Yeah. Maybe it's a brokerage. Maybe it's one of the big firms or whatever. You know, and we always say is that our job is to work with your financial advisor, not to take their money away.
Exactly. All right, let's take a break. Listen. Do you have a will? I don't know. You have one, don't you? Do you have a will? And when we come back, I want to touch bases on wills. And maybe if you can think in your experience, and I know you've seen and done an awful lot of them, what you think the most common mistakes are people do when they put it together. So at the very least, if you're dealing with this, if you've done one or you're thinking of doing one, you'll know what to avoid or to correct on yours. So let's take a break. We'll come back. 737-7587. This may be one of those shows where people sit back and listen, but you're welcome to call if you have any question. Free legal advice, all right? This guy's the expert. Let's nail it. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is a story.